I have no idea how my face looks on camera right now, but if there's a such thing as too much glow, I've certainly passed that threshold. Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video idea was actually inspired by my friend Maris from high school. She has an amazing bookstagram and booktube channel called Maris Reads Again that I will link up in the cards if I can, and definitely down below in the description box. You should go check her out. I love all of her content, and she also randomly posts a lot of delicious looking food in the DMV area all the time. So if you live around here and you're looking for good food, definitely go follow her. But yeah, so she posted on her Instagram a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago at this point, asking if anybody had any ideas for audiobook retention. Like when you're listening to an audiobook, just retaining the information that you are hearing. I am somebody who reads a ton of audiobooks. It's probably the way that I've read most of the books that I've read this year is through audiobook, and it really helped me get back into reading when I was in kind of a reading slump while I was in college. I know everybody, you start out in elementary school, middle school, loving reading, and then you get to high school and you have so much work, or you get to college and you have so much work, and then it's just not as feasible to make time for it. But audiobooks have really helped me to fill that gap, and I find that I am someone who doesn't struggle as much with retention, and so I came up with these tips that I will be giving to you in this video, and hopefully there's something here that can help you to have a more positive experience with audiobooks if you've been finding yourself struggling to remember the things that are happening in the stories. So let's just get right into it. So my first tip probably kind of feels like it defeats the purpose of reading an audiobook, but it is so helpful to me, especially when I am interacting with a book that I'm kind of struggling to get into. That is to have the physical book with you. I've done this really since I was a kid. Did anybody else used to get those big CD-ROM books from the library, and then it would be I remember distinctly Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. You would take one CD out and put it in your CD player, and then it would get to a certain part in the book, and then you'd have to take out the next CD and put it in your CD player because you can only put so many hours of audio on a single CD. But yeah, that's what I would do when I was a kid all the time. I would get audiobooks out from the library. I would get out the CD-ROMs, or they used to have these cassette things that you would just plug headphones into. I'll see if I can find a picture of those so that you know what I'm talking about. But I would get those books out, and then I would also check out the physical book, and I would read the physical book as the story was being read to me. That might be overstimulating for some people, but I found that was really helpful for me when I was I don't think I was doing it consciously, but I think it did really help me to gain the skill of being able to listen to things and understand what's happening and be able to orient myself within a story without feeling like I'm lost or I'm losing focus or anything like that. Another reason that I am really into audiobooks is because when I was in university, I studied abroad for a semester in England, and nobody ever told me how much fucking coursework English university students have to do. I think I read 14 whole books while I was there, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without audiobook apps. Literally, it wouldn't have happened if I didn't have my library app, if I didn't have that. I was Kobo Books, Audible, UK, all of that. I would just download audiobooks and then play them on 1.5 times speed, and I would have the physical book with me in my lap, flipping through to make sure that I didn't miss anything, or if there was something that I wanted to take note of so I could talk about it in class, I would put a little sticky note into it. But that there was this one book that I think was 600 pages long. It was so long. It was called The Line of Beauty by Alan Hollinghurst. Actually a very good book. Highly recommend that. But I never would have finished that if I didn't listen to it as an audiobook, because I could not. It was was like physically painful to try and like flip through the pages of this book and see like what progress I was at, and I'm like only a quarter of the way through the book, but I feel like I've been reading for 12 hours. So it's super helpful to retain information in audiobooks with the physical book with you as well. So I would highly recommend that. And the next tip is kind of goes along with that. You can just like put a button on the end of it. Start the audiobook that you're listening to as a physical book. So, like I said in my last example with The Line of Beauty by Alan Hollinghurst, I started that book as a physical book, and then I was having trouble getting through it, so I switched to the audiobook. And I think that this is helpful because you can kind of get your bearings with who the characters are, get into what the author's voice is, what it sounds like, what the general plot is without just kind of like throwing yourself into an audiobook and being like, okay, so how is this person related to this person, and where do I put this, and then I have to relate. It's like you don't have to put all of those puzzle pieces together when you're starting with the physical book. You read maybe like the first 40 pages of a physical book, and then if it's hard to get through at all, you can then switch to an audiobook. And I have found that in times when I have struggled to understand what was going on in a book, if I would even just like downloading an ebook version from my library's Libby app and like flipping through that and just like trying to figure out, okay, so this is connected to this and this is connected to that, like that is really helpful for me in terms of retaining information that is coming at me in audiobooks. So that, I guess that's like, if you're struggling to listen to audiobooks, don't necessarily look at them as a replacement for physical books. Start by adding them into your reading rotation, supplementing your physical books with them to kind of like practice and train your ears, train your mind to be able to retain this information. And then down the line, you can be able to put the physical book away and just like focus on the audiobook. The next tip that I have is to treat reading an audiobook like you would treat reading a regular book, any other kind of book. You need to leave time to focus on it. And this is something that I mess up on all the time. When I was trying to read Peter Pan, I kept trying to do other things while I was doing it. You know, we think of audiobooks as like podcasts kind of, or at least I think of audiobooks as podcasts sometimes. It's like I can just like put this on and then go clean my room and then walk around and drive my car and listen to it as I'm in the Target shopping, and it's like you're doing something else. Your focus is in another place, and so, or I'll use I statements. My focus is in another place, and so I'm like looking through the racks at Target trying to see if there's a shirt in my size, and then I click back into the audiobook that I'm listening to, and I'm like, oh crap, what just happened? Like, what's going on? So I would say, like, especially if retention is something that you're struggling with and something that is bothering you, if you're finding that you're listening to books and you're like, when the heck did Kathy die in Wuthering Heights? What do you mean she's a ghost? You know, if you are having moments like that when you're listening to audiobooks, I would recommend just like sit down and listen to them. It's also like a good mindfulness practice, you know, trying to do one thing at a time instead of forcing yourself to multitask. I was trying so hard to clean my room, cook dinner, and listen to Peter Pan at the same time, and I was like rewinding a whole bunch. Like, I was like, what the heck happened to Tiger Lily on the island? When did she get kidnapped? What's going on? And I finally was able to get into the book when I just sat down and listened to it. That seems like a common sense tip, but again, like, I feel like if you're thinking about audiobooks as podcasts, I think that there's a way that you can miss things in podcasts, and it's okay because you can pick things up from context, and like it just is kind of like a conversation between people or a story that is being told to you. It's not necessary that you like pick up on all of the plot details to understand what's going on. Whereas with a book, if you miss a key chunk of information while you're listening because you were doing something else, then that information is gone. You're not going to know what was said, and you're going to be lost within the plot of the book. So yeah, definitely recommend just sit down, take the time, focus and treat it like you would treat traditional reading. You're not walking around with a book in Target. You're not driving your car while you're reading a book. No, you're just like sitting down and reading it. So that is my next tip. Another tip that I have, and I think this and my final tip are kind of interconnected, but bookmark moments when you realized that your attention has slipped. I'll try and put a screen recording in. We can like put the screen recording off to the side or something, but essentially most, if not all, audiobook listening apps that I really don't know who listens to audiobooks on CD anymore, because I don't know who has CD players anymore. So if you're listening on a CD player or a cassette player, like, you probably won't be able to do this, but if you're listening on an app, they usually have a place where you can bookmark moments within the story. And I would recommend that if you have been listening, know what's going on, and then you just like have lost it and your like mind drifted, or you were focusing on something else, or you didn't realize what was going on, bookmark the moment when you realized that your attention slipped, and then rewind, go back to the last thing that you remember, and then listen again, and that bookmark will be the benchmark for when you know, okay, now I'm caught up. Now I know what's happening in the story. That goes right into my last tip, which is like, don't be afraid to rewind. An audiobook listening experience isn't the same as reading a physical book. But in some ways, it really is. Like, whenever you're reading, your attention can slip. You can be somewhere else. You might be tired reading a book, and then you have to like flip back to the last couple of pages because you're like, oh, my eyes were just kind of like glazing over the words. I wasn't really taking in anything that they said. So I would just recommend, don't be afraid to rewind. Don't think that you're a failure because you have to rewind, that you're not good at reading audiobooks because you have to rewind. I literally rewind my audiobooks all the time. I will be driving on the highway, like pressing the backspace 30 seconds button on my little dashboard because I'm like, what the fuck happened to Percy Jackson? Like, it's an aspect of any kind of reading experience of you, maybe your attention slips and you have to figure out what you missed, and that's okay. This is a kind of like, this is a tip for my nerds out there. I'm a nerd, me personally, but if you're finding that you're struggling with attention, like, make it a time where you have your notebook, you have your pen, sit down, write down things that were interesting that happened in the story. So like, make it so that you have to focus and write stuff down so that you can follow along with the story. And again, you're probably not going to have to do this every single time that you listen to an audiobook the same way. You probably won't have to keep the physical book with you all the time, and you probably won't always have to bookmark moments where you found your attention slipping. But it's a way that you can train your mind to get better at listening retention and listening comprehension and focusing on moments that are coming at you auditorily without the like written aid, I guess. So just like, it's like exercise for your mind. You're training your mind to think in this way that is foreign to it. Okay, so that is the end of my video about audiobook retention. This is definitely one of my shorter videos because I know that I like to talk a lot. But if you have finished this video, thank you so much for watching. I would ask that you subscribe to my channel. I make content about books, TV, movies, trying to get into fashion content, really literally just anything that I feel like talking about at a given moment. If you liked this video, please like it down below, and yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!